What we're about to show you in this video, you won't believe is even possible, because today we're introducing you to 8 people whose bodies are so unique, they're walking medical miracles. And we're starting right away with this woman from Oregon in the United States, who has a physical ability that puts a huge strain on her personally, but can save other people's lives. 37-year-old Elizabeth Anderson Sierra has what's known as hyperlactation syndrome, a condition that causes her breasts to produce milk continuously. Far more than her own 3 children could ever drink. Aside from that, they're already too old for breast milk anyway. But she couldn't simply wean once her kids were old enough, because due to the illness her body keeps releasing milk-producing hormones. She produces an unbelievable 8 liters of milk every single day. To manage that, she has to pump 6 times a day and everywhere, at the supermarket, at work, or while driving her children to school. Her daily life is extremely restricted because of it, and she suffers a lot because it naturally also means pain whenever she goes too long without being able to pump. She often even wakes up in the morning because of it. She would have the option of ending these agonies by having the glandular tissue removed from both breasts through a double mastectomy. But for a very long time she decided against it, and for a specific reason. She regularly donates her breast milk to a milk bank, which uses it to produce breast milk products for premature babies. For some mothers, for example, milk production hasn't started yet, and so their babies urgently depend on the breast milk of other women. Elizabeth is therefore saving the lives of hundreds of babies. Her entire refrigerator is filled with supplies. Over the course of 9 years, she has donated a total of 10,000 liters of milk, even officially setting a world record. The next case also shows just how unbelievably bizarre the human body can be. Yamina Karanam from Indianapolis, a 27-year-old computer science student, suddenly began developing severe headaches, hearing problems, and extreme fatigue. She had to pause her studies because she needed to sleep 15 to 20 hours a day, and even simple tasks like reading became torture. At first, doctors were baffled. Only after multiple examinations did neurologists discover the unbelievable cause. On X-ray images of her head, you could see something truly terrifying. A small creature had grown inside her head that even contained hair, bone, and teeth, essentially an embryonic twin that had never fully developed. Yamini and the doctors jokingly referred to it as her evil twin. It was then removed in surgery, and Yamini made a full recovery. The 59-year-old Thai woman Dwangjai Samaksamam would also love to get rid of her unique physical trait. But in her case, that's a bit more complicated. She suffers from an extremely rare condition called macrodystrophia lipomatosa, which leads to massive fat deposits in her arms and hands. Her hands are enormous, and each one weighs 10 kilograms. It's believed she may have the largest hands in the world. But that is definitely not a record she's proud of, because her hands cause her extreme pain. Even the simplest tasks like doing the dishes or combing her hair are incredibly exhausting for her. When she tries to hold on to something, it often slips from her grasp because after a while, she no longer has any feeling in her hands. As a child, Dwangjai was ashamed of her appearance and therefore spent the first 20 years of her life living very withdrawn, without going to school. By now, she dares to go out in public, also because she hopes for help from doctors in other countries. She has even had surgery before, but the tissue that was removed grew back again after a short time. Experts say the only option would be to amputate her hands. But Dwangjai absolutely does not want that. So she will likely have to live with this literally huge problem forever. The next person on our list shows that even the darkest medical prognoses aren't always right. Claudio Vieira de Oliveira from Monte Santo in Brazil was born with an extremely rare inherited condition called arthrogryposis multiplex congenita. Because of the malformation, his neck is permanently folded backward, which means he literally sees the world upside down. That's why he's also known as the upside down man. Right after his birth, doctors told Claudio's mother that he wouldn't survive more than 24 hours. But that assessment turned out to be wrong. Today, Claudio is 49 years old, mentally completely healthy, and lives a life that many would have thought impossible. While he depends on his family's help for getting dressed, cooking, and washing, he has learned how to cope with his body. He writes and uses his phone with his mouth and can walk with the help of special braces. He even completed a degree and works as a motivational speaker. His parents completely lost trust in doctors after they wrote their son off so quickly, and that's why they never took him back to the hospital again. But as you can see, the family still manages just fine, and Claudio leads a happy life. However, it isn't always immediately obvious that someone has a one-of-a-kind physical ability. That's the case, for example, with the teacher Laura Ponce from Linz in Brazil. She first realized her body was unusual when she was 16 years old. In an instant, her eyes changed and turned extremely red. Then something happened that terrified her. She felt something hard forming in her eye, basically a crystal tear. She immediately went to the emergency room with her mother, but the doctors themselves were shocked and couldn't help her. Since then, it has happened again and again. At first, the tears are always soft, but when they come into contact with air, they harden and Laura can remove them from her eye. It often causes her pain as well. For many years, no one could explain this unique phenomenon until one doctor said he had found an explanation. He said her eyes seem to produce more keratin than usual, a substance that, for example, is also what makes our fingernails hard. He therefore prescribed special eye drops intended to reduce the problem a little. Since then, she has been coping better, but her eyes will probably always remain a bit unusual. Let's continue with a woman who suffers just as much from her one-of-a-kind body. Sarah from the United States does everything she can to make sure no one notices her uniqueness. But when she wears short clothing in the summer, it's basically impossible to hide. That's because she has 2 additional breasts in her armpits that often peek out of her t-shirts. It's a congenital malformation that is extremely rare. They only developed after her teenage years, and at first there was no way to tell they were actually breasts. But the swelling under her armpits kept getting larger, and if you look closely, you can even see small nipples on them. At some point, Sarah had to accept that she really does have 4 breasts. She felt very uncomfortable with it, and is also quite limited in everyday life, especially when she wants to train her upper body. The breasts are basically in the way. She did consider having them removed, but she was too afraid that the lymph nodes in that area could be damaged, so she decided against it and is now trying to live with it as best she can. Now we come to a case that is practically a miracle and called into question a lot of what we thought we knew about the human body. Because surviving without a brain is generally considered impossible. But little Noah Wall, who was born in 2012 in Cumbria, England, proved the opposite. Even before he was born, a routine examination found that he suffered from a spinal malformation that often leads to severe brain damage. In addition, an ultrasound showed that his head was full of fluid. For the doctors, it was therefore clear that Noah would be born with virtually no functioning brain and would not be able to survive. But Noah seemed to have superpowers. He was operated on immediately after birth and survived the first critical days in the hospital, even though doctors said his brain consisted of only 2% functioning tissue. And over time, something happened that even medical professionals couldn't explain. His brain began to grow. Through further surgeries, intensive therapies, and years of medical care, he developed abilities no one had thought possible for him. Noah learned to speak, to read, to write, and to walk, and today he is a child like any other. His case sparked new discussions worldwide about the brain's ability to adapt. While Noah had to struggle with the fact that his brain wasn't developed enough, Dan Maurer from Michigan had to claim the exact opposite about his body. In his case, one part of his body was particularly overdeveloped, his scrotum. The 39-year-old at the time suffered from an extremely rare condition called scrotal lymphedema, which caused his scrotum to swell more and more over the years. Eventually, it reached a size that made his everyday life almost impossible. Walking, showering, or simple movements became torture, and he was severely restricted in his mobility. In 2014, Dan decided to undergo surgery, during which an unbelievable 36 kilograms of tissue were removed from his scrotum and additional fatty tissue was taken from his abdominal area. The operation lasted a full 14 hours. Afterward, he was finally able to live normally again without being stared at strangely by everyone. Write in the comments which story moved you the most. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video and subscribe. Bye, see you next time.